Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and much appreciated you guys swinging by the channel to spend some time with me, because today we're going to be talking about the fact there are too many people qualifying for the Bassmaster Classic. There's 56 qualifiers this year. I've got some pretty, opinionated stances on this. We're going to get into it in today's video. And after we get done with it, I'd be really curious to hear your guys' opinion on it as well. So that's the topic of today's episode. Also, guys, before we get started, the favorite part of the videos for you guys, my wonderful housekeeping tips you guys have to endure every video. Just wanted to remind you guys that at the time of filming this video, it's January 21st, getting into February, starting tomorrow. Guys, here's my favorite February jig color right here, a brown and orange living rubber jig. This is my Blaukat throwback jig with a green pumpkin zoom big salty chunk on it. You probably heard me talking about this, but guys, February and into early March, you can't beat a brown and orange jig. So I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description if you'd like to pick up one of my throwback jigs. One of the few jigs on the market that has a living rubber skirt, which is far superior to silicone. Bass prefer much more than silicone do. Reason you don't see the living rubber, guys, is they're very labor intensive. You got to hand tie them. A lot more work that goes into putting them together. So link in the description there. Okay, guys, I'm gonna get into this here. I sort of want to, talk about the Bassmaster Classic, the number of qualifiers in it, and how it's evolved to the point now where there's too many of them, and sort of talk a little bit about the negative effect that is having on Bassmaster, sort of giving the organization a self-inflicted wound, which they seem to do a lot here the last couple of years. So let's get into why this is not a good thing. Now, first of all, guys, I'm going to say right off the bat, having 56 or 60 anglers in the Bassmaster Classic is not a good thing for the anglers. Now, I think that over the course of the history of bass, there's been anywhere between 24, to 61 anglers a couple of years ago. But for many, many years, there were 24 anglers. I think from like the start of the Classic in 1971 up until the mid 80s or early to mid 80s, there was 24 qualifiers. So you had, the full field anglers, whether it be, 150, 200 anglers, and only 24 anglers would qualify for the Classic. And then when I started fishing in 1986, for the 86 Classic, there were only 35 qualifiers. So we had these big fields, 200-man fields, and it was just cut and dried. There was no bunch of, coming in from every direction, all these add-in qualifiers for federation, high school, this and that, individual tournament winners, just a hodgepodge of ways to get into the Classic. There was a clear-cut path to making the Bassmaster Classic, and there were only, 24 to 35 anglers that made it for years. Now, the huge advantage to this, and this is what I'm going to get into why this is a terrible decision Bassmaster made, another terrible decision to increase the Classic qualifiers on terms of the angler's point of view, is when you qualified for the Classic, those many years that I did back in the 80s and 90s, like I said, there was only 35 pros that made the Classic. So the 35 pros that had actually made the Classic, it was something special. And it's like people knew every Classic qualifier. There wasn't that many of them. You stood out in the industry. The anglers that qualified for the Classic were able to parlay that Classic qualification into some very decent sponsorship opportunities. Back before they started having too many anglers in the Classic, when you made the Classic, the industry took note of it. That was the premier event in the sport of fishing. So if you made the Bassmaster Classic, it was so easy to go to a company, I don't care if it was a boat company, tackle company, whatever it may be, and work out some type of a deal, usually for a financial compensation, some type of financial retainer. But what happened as the years went by, Bassmaster, I know the reason, but they started adding more people to the Classic every single year, up until in the recent years, we've gotten, like I said, 56 anglers for the Classic this year, been as high as 60. And what that has done, it has diminished the value of the Bassmaster Classic in terms of the anglers being able to market that qualification to potential sponsors, simply because there's too many people out there. It's almost like Bassmaster is just giving a participation award out to the Elite Series qualifiers, by allowing that many people to qualify for the Classic. I don't even know all the routes now. You can qualify from the Elite Series, you can qualify from winning tournaments in the Opens. I think there's some high school and college, people that make it, federation, whatever. Too many people. And while this may sound like a good thing, what it does, it waters down the importance of making the classic, because there are so many people that make it and make it every year that they get watered down in the in the big fields, and you can't stand out in terms of trying to market yourself to a particular company because there's just too many people in it. Now, like a lot of the reasons they do this, I've tried to analyze why Bassmaster continues to shoot themselves in the foot on so many different fronts. But one of the things about this, I'm assuming or speculating from my point of view, if they think that they can bring in classic qualifiers from different areas of the sport, like federation, opens, college and high school, that's going to generate interest within the organization. And that is a very self-serving point of view for the organization. When you're talking in terms of being concerned about the anglers and the anglers' families and the well-being and the future of the anglers to make a living in the sport, all they're doing is hurting the anglers with this. It doesn't hurt the organization. It hurts the anglers' ability to make a good living in the sport. Right now, it is more difficult to maintain and gain and secure sponsorships as a Bassmaster Elite Pro that makes the Bassmaster Classic than it's ever been before. There's several different reasons to be, to be fair on the whole thing. This goes into more than just having too many people in the tournaments. It goes into the fact that social media has transcended tournaments in terms of the value that anglers bring to their sponsorship dollars. Anymore, tournament anglers are pretty much a low value investment for a business. It's all about people that have big social media followings, because that's where you get the impressions. You do not get that many impressions off of being in the tournament. Let's take, for example, let's say that you're one of those qualifiers this year, one of the 56 qualifiers that had made it from one of the outlier routes in the Classic, open, winter, whatever like that. When you try to come to a potential sponsor and try to market that Classic qualification in terms of trying to get some financial compensation for that, there's really no value to a company to do that, because they're going to say, okay, you qualified for the Bassmaster Classic, tell me how that is going to allow you to increase brand name impressions for my product. There's no route to do that, because simply they've got watered down in these big fields. Now, it wasn't like that before. Back 30 years ago, when there was only 35 people in the Classic, those anglers got opportunities. They got opportunities with magazine articles, with speaking in seminars and sport shows. They were household names, and being so, they were a lot more attractive to a potential sponsor. But now nobody knows who they are, because they change every single year. It's like there's so many routes to the Classic that you can't build a star base from that point of view. And that's one of the things that Ray Scott was a master at. He was really wanting to build stars in the sport. And in doing that, you cannot have these big fields to do that. And it sounds like it's good for the anglers as far as giving them the opportunities, but in reality, it hurts the anglers. It makes it more difficult for them to maintain the sponsorships that are necessary to stay in the sport unless you're independently wealthy, which that's the way fishing's getting anymore, guys. It's just the independently wealthy people that are able to actually fish at the tour level. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. I saw that, I saw that there was 56 anglers in the Classic this year. And I just sort of shook my head at that, because that just diminishes the value of making the Classic. I remember back when I was reading Bassmaster magazine, when they had 24 and 35 Classic qualifiers, I could list every one of them. If you ask me, it's like, Randy, who made the Classic in 1975? I could just go down the list. Hank Parker, Roland Martin, Bill Dance, Gary Klein. I remembered it. You can't do that with 55 and 60 anglers now, with a bunch of people that turn over and change every year. And that is the problem that we've had in the sport, is with the advent of forward-facing sonar and the advent of too many Classic qualifiers, it's very difficult to build stars anymore, because you can't stand out as a spotlighter. There's too many people that spotlight. And since spotlighting is not a skill, it's basically just, utilizing a game. nobody can dominate the sport as a spotlighter. Before, they could dominate the sport. I mean, David Fritz dominated as a deep cranker. You know, Denny Brauer dominated as a flipper. You know, Larry Nixon dominated as a worm fisherman. You don't have that anymore. You don't have that diversity of skills. So that's just another aspect with that. And there's another thing with that. One other thing I'll leave you guys with is that Bassmaster pays half the field to their anglers, and it makes it sound like a big deal if you get a check. I want to say this right now about the Bassmaster tournaments, the Elite Series and the Classic. It's the easiest circuit there is in the world to succeed at, because you have to just beat one other person in a tournament to get a check in a Bassmaster Elite Series, and they take almost half the field to the Classic. Now go and try fishing a Bassmaster Open or a Toyota Series. There can be 250 anglers in that tournament, and they only pay 40 places. In the Toyota Series, there can be, like my Toyota Series this year, there was 200 and some people in the events, all local hammers. They took 25 people to the championship. Make no mistake about it, the Bassmaster Elite Series is the easiest circuit to compete at out of all the circuits. The other circuits, the lower level circuits, are a lot more difficult. So anyway, guys, just let me know what you think about it. Is 56 people too many people on the Classic? What needs to be done about it? And we'll talk later.